Thank you. Uh, my name's Ross M., and I am a recovered alcoholic, thanks to um, a loving God, as I understand God today, one that I did not, was not in a good relationship with. 12 Steps to Alcoholics Anonymous, strong sponsorship, and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a God-given sobriety date of October 5th, 1989. For that I'm eternally grateful, and just about anybody else who would have anything to do with me is grateful too. As he was saying, Steve was saying, yeah, I'm not sure where and when we met. It's been a long, strange trip. I do know that I found flyers where we had Don and Terry come to San Rafael to our Fourth Dimension group, and they when they used to do that pilgrimage, it was a 7-week deal, and they would go out to Sonoma County, to Petaluma, and different areas, and go through the book. It was a phenomenal deal. I have copies on cassette. As I was talking to Steve earlier, but who knew CDs were going to go the way of, who knew that CDs were going to be obsolete? But I get ahead of myself. I'm a sense and ease kind of guy. I love that sense and ease and comfort that I get at once from drinking. And it's in the doctor's opinion, it talks about how we can't distinguish the truth from the false, and that sense of ease and comfort that we get. So I'm a strong advocate of we don't know what we don't know. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not know what I didn't know. I didn't know anything about the twofold nature of my disease, coupled with that spiritual malady. But once again, I get ahead of myself. I drank somewhere around 14, 15. And I have two opinions on the first step. But I will say that when I started drinking, my life became completely unmanageable immediately. I was known in high school as Rosso Refo. To know me was to be reefed. That's how I socialized. They tried to expel me for sales in my sophomore year, first day of the second semester. I had a quarter pound of weed on me. And what was it? And by the way, I have nothing on the dispensaries today. So they booted me out, and it was a public school, and I lived about 7-8 blocks from the school. And when the next semester came for my junior year, they wanted to be able to have expelled me. They wanted to make me, their case. My parents said, no, it's a public school. He has a right to an education. We'll get a lawyer. They backed down. I went back, and I went into sales of smaller items. At that time, the school owned the lockers, so I was just carrying. Just before my 17th birthday, Columbus Day, October 1970, I was with who I considered my best friend at the time, which I don't know why I call him my friend. We were out on the Sonoma coast, Shell Beach, just short of Jenner. We were on some bluffs. We went out there on a Friday. We're going to, go tripping on Saturday. There's a Shell Beach. It's this phenomenal beach. The sand is like marbles. And so they come up and they're just roll. I mean, it's just beautiful. But we sat on the edge of this cliff and I watched pelicans dive into the water for fish, and I'm all never seen that before. And I even said to my friend, I said, man, those Hawaiians, those Mexicans, they are nuts. They're crazy. They dive, look at down there, diving. I said, you won't even clear those rocks. I said, they're nuts. You couldn't pay me enough to jump or whatever. So we spent the night in sleeping bags up on the hill on the bluff. Woke up, fog hadn't lifted, and we took some lysergic acid dithiamide, which is LSD. The fog hadn't lifted, so we weren't going to go down to the beach yet. I don't know if my friend suggested or I did, but we went down to the bluff where we had sat on the point, and I was on the receiving end of an attempted murder. I was pushed off a 75-foot cliff. And I like to tell people, it was a bummer. It was excuse me. It was a bad trip. I took them 4 hours to get me out, which is essentially what an acid trip is. And I know this is an AA meeting, it's an outside issue, but so I'm looking up at this point, and I'm thinking, man, that's where we were sitting, I think. I said, maybe I'm still in a sleep bag. I'm still asleep, and I'm just dreaming. I haven't woke up yet. And then I realized that no, it had happened. So I attempt to get up. The problem is my left femur is broken, and my hip is on the left side. So fortunately, my right leg's not broken. I go to lift that up to get up, and my foot is virtually torn off. It's hanging by some skin and stuff. The guy that I was with, he went down the coastline, saw some fishermen, realized they were going to find me. I mean, he left me for dead. I mean, they say I flew 50 feet, bounced about 25 on jagged rocks. So he sees these fishermen and said, "Oh, my friend, he jumped off this cliff, and we need help." So they got the sheriffs. I got a helicopter ride out of the deal, and spent about 5 weeks in a community hospital. And my girlfriend comes in to see me in ICU unit, and she said, "Well, where is he?" And they're all, "You're standing right next to him." And so she couldn't recognize me. But I had said to her, I said, somebody pushed me. It was only this guy, Bob, and I. So she approached him. He says, "Well, I slipped and bumped into him." And at that point, it's my experience that it was all I could do to want to believe that it was just an accident. I know that if he actually had slipped and bumped and fell, at this point, I realized he would have hit me, I don't know, in my legs, maybe my hindquarters or something like that. Now, these two hands were firmly placed under my shoulder blades, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't walk along the edge of cliffs on acid. Turned 17 in the hospital and was able to come home. Learned how to walk again. About 8 months later, Robin said she was in love with Bob, and they got married, and that was fine. He attempted to kill her several times, and we aren't great pickers, whatever. I tell this story because then, I asked the doctor, "What should I do?" My uncle is out here in Sacramento. He knew the leading orthopedic surgeon. They put my foot back on. I've had different opinions from doctors. They said they would have amputated. So I'm ahead. I got a leg. But what I like to tell people is I spent a whole other lifetime before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 34 when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell just before my 17th birthday, and it took me a whole lifetime to get here. And so back to the first step. When I came in, I had moved back home my parents' house, my dad's all, how long are you going to be here? I said, I don't know, 6 months, 3 years later. And so I'm going to meetings and I don't know what I don't know. And I hear people talk about, and trust me, my life's unmanageable. I'm unemployable. I've moved back home, so I can see powerless over alcohol, life's unmanageable. And I think a lot of people believe that. But I've met people that still have cars and, a wife or a husband and job. My understanding today of the first step is I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life's unmanageable in regards to making the decision to stay stopped. When I get up in the morning, I say, I'm just not drinking today. I just need to hydrate, and I'm not going to drink today. And maybe I say that about 8 in the morning, somewhere around 10, 10:30. Maybe somebody suggests hair on the dog, just to have a beer or just something to kind of get even, and I'm not even negotiating with myself about, well, wait a second, didn't you say you weren't going to drink today? No, I don't even think of that. What I'm thinking about is drinking. And so if I can't manage a decision to stay stopped, that's where the unmanageability is can I manage a decision to not drink? And so that's how I understand the first step. So with that, now I'm in AA and I don't know what I don't know. And I'm hearing people tell me that this is a spiritual program. And my alcoholism wants to kill me, but will settle for drunk. I go into the meetings and I'm looking around and you guys are praying and you're passing baskets. And I've seen this on Sunday. It's supposed to be spiritual. It looks pretty religious to me. My alcoholism wants me to leave. It wants me to have contempt prior to investigation. So, and then we can get into my atheism, which I was card carrying, I thought, atheist. So what happened was when I was approached by those in whom the problem had been solved on page 25, there was nothing left for me to do but to pick up the simple set of spiritual tools laid at my feet and get rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence that I didn't even dream of. I didn't even know existed. I mean, I pick up pennies and dimes and nickels off the ground. Why wouldn't I open up a spiritual set of tools laid at my feet? Wow. No one's putting me in an arm lock. But if you wanted to start a fight with me when I was new, I was a guy that's in the big book whose hair bristles at the mention of God. If you want to start a fight or an argument, just come here. Come talk to me about God. God was right in the. If you've ever watched The Simpsons and Homer's choking Bart, that's right about where God was in my throat. And I was pretty rabid. So someone finally approached me when I was in a calm mood and said, well, what's an atheist? I said, someone who doesn't believe in God, or there is no God. And so they said, well, then you acknowledge there's a God, you just don't believe in him, right? So no, there's no God. So then it was offered to me that so for thousands of years, millions of people have believed in something greater than themselves that a lot of them choose to call God. They're all wrong, and you're right. Talk about selfish. So that helped me to become an agnostic, and I truly believe in God today, but you wouldn't know it if I didn't explain this to you. So we get to page 30 when we were approached, and I think that's it for the. Hopefully it wasn't too long of the drunk-a-log. The how do I approach people? First of all, I take people to page 44, the two-part question. Some people call it 2 questions, and I will ask them to read that. We'll go to 44, and I'll say, why don't you read for me? And it says, excuse me, in the preceding chapter, you've learned something of alcoholism to learn. We hope that you have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And then I will have them read, and I will stop them at or. I said, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, and I will have them stop, and I'll ask them, you ever been able to stay stopped? And most of the time they'll have to say no, because they're new. They got 40 days or 20 days or whatever. And so they'll say, oh no, I've never been able to stop entirely. Step 1. Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, and then I'll ask them to stop. So when you start drinking, can you absolutely guarantee me that, you'll have 2 drinks and go home? Hey, honey, I'm stopping by work after work with my friends. We're going to have 2 drinks. I'll be home by 7. And I find myself at 10 o'clock at night with new friends playing pool or whatever. So a lot of times the people will laugh when you ask them, or when they read that, it's like, why would I control the amount I drink? So it says there that you were probably alcoholic. And if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Promise. So then I would probably go so far as to say to the person, because now I've let them diagnose themselves. And then I would ask them, if I could absolutely guarantee that you never drank again, would that be of any value to you? There's only one answer, but I've heard plenty. Most of them will say yes, and I can do that because it says at the beginning of the book, clear-cut, precise directions. Clear-cut, precise directions. This is a basic text. So I've had people say, well, you can't guarantee that. It's only one day at a time. I can, slip on the crack in the pavement and get thirsty. No, that's not true. 10-step promises promise me that I will never, that the problem will go away. So if they're interested, then I would take them. I'd go through the doctor's opinion with them, and then I would take them to 30. Page 30 talks about fully conceding to your innermost self. That is the first step. Most people, I would say to them, I said, if you're like me, you'll tell me whatever you think I want to hear. And you'll say, oh yeah, I fully concede, Ross. Can we do step 2? No, I would tell you to go home and think about it. Fully concede to your innermost self. I don't really care what you tell me. I mean, I do, but I don't. I want you to fully concede to your innermost self that you're done, that that you can never drink successfully. Earlier in that part of the chapter, it talks about the great obsession of every abnormal drinker is that someday they will learn to control and enjoy their drinking. So the fallacy there is for me to enjoy my drinking, don't tell me how much to drink. And if you're gonna make me control my drinking, you're not gonna have a pleasant experience hanging out with me. I will make your life miserable enough that you will allow me to drink the way I need to drink. So it says the great obsession. My understanding of the great obsession is an idea that overpowers all other ideas. When I start thinking about drinking, all bets are off, and I'm off to the races. I've heard people say, oh, call me before you drink. Not unless you're buying. I am, come on, yeah. First of all, I'm not thinking clearly. I'm thinking about drinking. So I have this idea that overpowers all other ideas. So that's the obsession. It also says that the illusion that someday I will be able to drink. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursuit to the gates of insanity and death. So the illusion is like seeing a magician. An illusion that's out there. And then it'll say in the next paragraph, the delusion, that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion, now that's in here in my mind, the delusion that I'm like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. And then it talks about we are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking, and no real alcoholic ever recovers control. And the really, you and I don't want to drink like other people. Have you ever seen normal people drink? I mean, that's alcohol abuse. Oh, I've had enough. Oh, I'm starting to feel it. That's the point. That's why we're drinking. So, step one, fully concede, innermost self. So until I was approached by those who knew the problem had been solved, and then taken through the doctor's opinion and explained to me what my problem is, that I have this mental obsession that overpowers all other ideas. And for me, I don't even think it's a mental thing. I think it's that my body remembers. It remembers that. That's, just that sense and ease and comfort that I get at once from drinking immediately. So, but the problem there is I don't digest it at the same rate as others, and I actually get a phenomenon of craving where I have to have more. Let's see, make the decision. So what happened was, and I'm besides Don Brown guy, excuse me, my first sponsor Joe and Charlie used to come out to Sacramento once a year for 20 years. And I'm a slow study. I only saw them 17 times. And just amazing guys. What I was going to say was, all right, in 10 step, let's see, fold, twofold, prodigy. Belief in. Oh, so as I'm this atheist, what happened was, I'm extremely comfortable in these rooms. They told me that I'm an outright mental defect or defective, outright mentally defective. So I'm very comfortable in a room with other outright mental defects. So if you're new and you're having a problem with God, which I thought I did, they said to me, well, Ross, you get to choose your own conception as long as it makes sense to you. I'm, well, wait a second, didn't you just tell me I was an outright mental defective? And they said, yeah, you're going to allow me, an outright mental defect, to choose my own conception of God? Yeah, as long as it makes sense to you, Ross. I mean, don't pick a doorknob. It'll turn on you. Give me a break. So the question would be, how free do you want to be? Well, entirely would be nice. So now I get to choose my own conception, as long as it makes sense. Wow. So then we get to page 45, and it says that lack of power is my dilemma. Oh, lack of power. So how was I to find that power? Well, let's see. 45 says, there's a book spot. Wait. It says, lack of power was my dilemma. We had to find a power greater by which we could live. It had to be a power greater than ourselves. Step 2. Obviously, but where and how are we to find this book? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Wow. No half Nelsons. Nobody's going to twist your arm behind your back. The book is going to show us how to get enabled to access that power, which will solve your problem. From 45 on, I'm a firm believer that it's not even about drinking anymore. 45 on, it's about how do I access that power, which will solve my problem. Wow. So then I get to, let's see, and then I get to up to page 60. And let's see. And then they talk about doing a third step prayer. What exactly are we doing? And it says on page 60 that I'm going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. What exactly does that mean? Well, what's my will? Joe and Charlie use example that if I was to go to a lawyer today and express what worldly goods I wanted to have my children to have or my wife to have, that would be my thoughts on this day. So my will is my thoughts. So I'm going to turn my thoughts to the care of God as I understand Him. And I'm also going to turn my life. Well, what's my life? My life are the actions I take on a daily basis. So I'm going to turn my thoughts and my actions over to the care of God as I understand it. Now, if you were to go to page 89, what's on 89? I don't know. Let's see. On 89, it says that when agitated, when I go throughout the day, as we go through the day, we pause. And when agitated or doubtful, we ask for the right thought or action. Wow. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. So what my notes in my book say, see page 60. So it's always about going back to God, seeking God. If I'm agitated, I need to go back to God. If I'm full of fear, I need to go back to God. Page 69 gives, or 68, my apologies. Page 68 has a prayer for us, a fear prayer. Not a lot of people know it's there because there's no amen. On page 60, it says that we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality a way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. Here's my prayer. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. And then it says, at once I commenced to outgrow fear. See, if I'm full of fear and I'm just going to stay in fear, what's God going to do for me? You know, I need to seek God and ask God and say, okay, God, remove my fear and direct your attention to what He would have me be. Now, a short version of what God wants for me is on page 77. Third line down, it says, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. Wow. So if I'm full of fear and I'm jammed up and I'm locked up, how can I fit myself to be a maximum service to God and the people about us? So I need God's help. The idea really is that the thinking mind that got me here doesn't have the power to overcome the thinking mind that got me here. Or short for that is self can't overcome self. I don't have the ability to overcome my own problems. I have to go to God. And let's see. So example of, and I worked the steps in about longer than it took the original 100. The original 100 did it in 30 to 45 days because they didn't have time. It was, you hear people stuff at me. Oh, you didn't get sick overnight, so you're not going to get well. Take your time. If you're the real deal, I don't have time. It's not a matter if I'm going to drink again. It's when I'm going to drink again. So I need to work the steps rapidly. I am a firm believer in the action will change you. Now, forward to the first edition, there's a guy, Dr. Mark, and Steve probably knows who he is. He's some East Bay ER doctor. But what I learned from him was on the forward to the first edition is that we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So twofold nature of my disease, mind and body. And it says to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So this book is telling me this is the main purpose, is to show me how to recover. So I was back to Dr. Mark. He has said that back before there was 12 steps, there was no solution for us. We were just dying. You would go to Towns Hospital, they'd clean you up, hydrotherapy, you get a clean drunk, hot and cold water, moral psychology. And the doctors, Dr. Silkworth, he didn't know any kind of planned action. All he knew was entire abstinence. Well, the further you and I are away from alcohol without any other kind of help, the more restless and irritable we get. So they would do their treatment for you. If you came back a second time, they would do it a second time. The third time you came back to Towns Hospital, they would, like they said to Lois, I think, we're going to send him home. He'll probably be dead within 6 months with delirium tremens. We've done everything we can for him. And we're going to label him a hopeless alcoholic. So back in the 30s and the 20s, hopeless was a clinical term used by the medical fraternity because they didn't know what to do with us. So, but the good news there is that I came in and I read that, and it took me a while to see seemingly. It only seems that you and I are hopeless. Wow, really? The book tells me that, we're a baffled lot, that we're doomed. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I sure hoped it was going to work. I don't know where else to go. So it only seems that you and I are hopeless, that there is hope for us. So when I will do a third step with a person, I will go through, well, actually then what happens is I get to page 62 and I find out that I'm just a selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate human being, that the root of my troubles is that I step on the toes of my fellows, and seemingly without provocation, they retaliate. So selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt me seemingly without provocation, but I invariably find that at some time in the past, I made decisions based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt. I was never a victim by that person that pushed me off the cliff. I sat there the night before and volunteered. Said, man, those Mexicans, those Hawaiians are nuts. They're crazy. You couldn't pay me enough. Nobody paid me, trust me. But I essentially volunteered. But I drank and used for about 17 years, thinking I was the victim of some kind of circumstances. And the point being is I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I hear all these people talking about their circumstances, and I don't know what I don't know yet. And I hear people saying, well, if you were married to my spouse, if you had my employer, if this had happened to you, you would be an alcoholic. And that's all not true. Did I drink heavier? Did it exasperate my condition? Absolutely. Did I not want to think about the hands under my shoulder blades pushing me out, flying over a cliff that I knew where I was going. I knew I wasn't clearing the water. And, so I'm a strong believer in, like, a lot of contemporary AA meetings are what I call page 62 meetings. It's all about me and what happened. My friend Chris R will say, oh, who's got the problem? He says, oh, pick me. I get the problem, And then people want to talk about what happened to them. So they're back to selfishness, self-centeredness. Now, I like the Mark Houston would talk about. He talks about asleep, dreaming you're awake. It's Anthony DeMello. He's a Jesuit priest who died in 1989, but he has written several books. But it's about going through life asleep, dreaming we're awake, just running through life like it's a normal thing. What happened was, what Mark Houston would do is I'm sitting at home and all of a sudden the door knocks and I go to the front door and there's a limo driver for me. Wow, cool. It's going to drive me around all day. Driver says, we're going to drive you all week. Now, I'm fear and I'm going to drive you all day long. And I can't make it tomorrow, but don't worry, there's another driver coming, resentment, and he will be with you and he's going to drive you all day long. It says driven by all these different forms of fear and self-pity. So I get driven. So what's the solution? It says troubles are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. The alcoholic's extreme example, self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, what's that mean? Above everything? We alcoholics must be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. And I've heard Charlie's wife, Katie, she talked about, she says, I've been in some demonstrations and stuff, but I've never really been in a riot, with tear gas, SWAT coming after you and stuff. So, if you think about it, what's self-will run riot? So top of 63, that first paragraph is what I understand to be third step promises. Promises are promises are promises. What I will do is I do a third step prayer with my proteges. And then at once, it says we commence to start on a rigorous action of, at once we launched on a vigorous course of action. First step was personal house cleaning. So, and it says, which many of us never attempted, though our decision was vital and a crucial step. So it's, if you go to a hospital, that's the first thing they do. They take your vitals to see if you're even alive. And it's a crucial step, and it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in our past which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom. So then it gets down to resentment's our number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual dis-ease. For I've not only been mentally and physically ill, twofold nature of my disease, I have been spiritually sick. And when the spiritual malady is overcome, I straighten out mentally and physically. And so in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. I use the real common sheets. I'm a big book guy. I use, people call them the Joe and Charlie sheets or whatever. Resentments and fears, sex conduct, and then harms to others. What I do now, which is different than when I first started getting sober, is all I need is 2 columns. I don't need the rest, because I'll do them with you when I do 5. So the book talks about it and explains it. Joe and Charlie explain it. Page 65 shows all the different categories. Where we get confused is that we do it like we read across. Mr. Brown's wife, his mistress, his wife. I was instructed by Joe and Charlie that I do first column, and I will cover the first column with a piece of paper. Let's see if and I write all my resentments down, top to bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. Then when I'm done with all those that I believe I have, then I will do a columns. The second column. Bill never used more than I think 8 words. I don't need a dissertation. All I need is bullet points, something that will remind you, well, here's what really happened. So you can expand. So I only need 2 columns. I'm resentful at so-and-so, 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 all those different people. If you do it the other way around, by the time you get down to the third person, you're still thinking about what that first person did to you. It will totally mess you up. So I let them do the 2 columns. And then when I'm with them and doing a 5th step, I'll say, well, did that affect your self-esteem? Yeah, click. Pride, your emotional, boom, 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 boom. And then we can look at where was I dishonest, selfish, just self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, and what could I have done different, or where was I at fault? And we can look at that 4th column. So that's how I do 4 and 5. When I do 6, 6, sometimes they're called the forgotten steps. If you're a big book thumper or whatever, they aren't forgotten. But when I get to 6 on page 76, my apologies. See, it says if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We emphasize willingness as being indispensable. Are we ready now to let God remove from us all those things we had admitted are objectionable? See, if I don't do a 4th and a 5th, I don't know what's objectionable. How do I ask God to remove what's objectionable if I don't realize that I'm just a selfish, self-centered, frightened, inconsiderate, dishonest human being? Are those objectionable? Absolutely. So what Joe and Charlie would do is he says there's a prayer that and I have it written in my book, is what I do is I ask God to help me not act on my old way of thinking. So it's, please, dear God, help me not act on my old way of thinking. I digress a little bit. See, I have this condemning God, whatever. And my first sponsor, he did this thing with me. He says, why don't you just invite him into your life? I'm like, what? Yeah, you're going to go shopping or something like that. Say you're driving and just say, hey, God, we're going shopping. And so it helped me have a friendly God, one that I could look at as a friend. I don't need a one that's sitting up in the heavens taking notes. I mean, I'm never going to make it there anyway, so don't even bother writing the notes. I don't need a condemning God. I have a God that loves me unconditionally and understands what my dilemma is, but has plans for me and loves me. Is not a condemning God. There's an exercise you can do on 63 if you have a problem with parents or fathers or whatever. What's a good father? What's a good father? Throw away. I'm heavy on the set aside prayer. Set aside your old ideas. If you had a father maybe that abandoned you, or you wasn't raised right, or beat you or whatever, what's a good father do? And I have 3 daughters that I raised. What's a good father? I would love them unconditionally. I would guide them, and I like to say I teach them how to tie shoes, and then Velcro come around. Here's my relationship, as I digress from 6, with my youngest daughter. My youngest daughter liked to drink. I watch them, and in high school she'd go to parties. Now, check this out. My daughter actually asked me to be her designated driver. She would ask me, say, hey, Daddy, I'm going to go to a party tonight. There could be some drinking. Any chance you'd take me there? And I'm all, yeah, I'll take you there. And then, can I call you when I'm done? She'd call me. She'd say, I'm ready to leave. And I'd go over and pick her up. And there's no lectures to endure or any of that stuff. But how's that? I mean, I never asked my parents to come pick me up someplace. I don't need the wet blankets. My daughter loved me enough that she would let me be her designated driver. What a deal. So back to 6. So then I have this prayer. And then on 7, we have a 7-step prayer that we do. And this is from what they wrote, I have written. This is the first personality change brought by action. I'm going to ask my Creator now that I be willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Grant, it's not give me. Like in California, there's land grants. When we came to California, they granted use of land to you. And if you didn't keep it up, or if you didn't put fences up so your sheep didn't cross over into the other guy's pasture, they'd take the land away from you. They grant you this. So it's not a gift. But the second prayer that Joe would say is, we ask God to help us act on our new way of thinking. That's 7. So essentially you're kind of making a deal with God, unlike the ones we used to make when we get pulled over or something, say, please don't let them pull me, I'll never drink again. You start negotiating. But your deal is you say, okay, God, help me to not act on my old way of thinking. Well, what's my old way of thinking? Selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, frightened, and dishonest, and inconsiderate to people. And then 7 is, I'm going to ask God to help me act on my new way of thinking. So that's 6 and 7. 8 is just one prayer. 8 is your list from 4. And if you're not willing, it says there's an 8-step prayer. It says, if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Boom. First reference. I think there's 4 or 5 references to any lengths. So now you have a list. I'm an advocate of, Joe and Charlie. Well, people will say there's some people I'm never going to make amends to. That's fine. You make a list of nows who you can get to directly. Laters, maybe they're across the country and there's somewhere you can't see them directly. Maybes and nevers. You can have nevers. No, there's no way. There's no way. So what's the 9th step said? The 9th step, 9th step tells me 3 things. How to make amends. Back to 78, I think. No, 77. 9th step tells me 3 things. How to make them. Direct. Eyeball to eyeball. I need to see if you're looking at me or if you're looking away like, yeah, thanks, man. Where to make them. Wherever possible. I hear a lot of whenever. If it's whenever, it's not going to happen. Okay? It's not going to happen. So wherever. And then when not to do so. When that would injure them or others. I hear people talking specific. You can go through 9th step, how to make them. They're direct. We say stay on our side of the street. We don't bring their behavior or whatever. We don't talk about them. We go to them with a heartfelt, I was wrong. I don't know if I can correct it. My behavior was inconsiderate, selfish, dishonest, and frightened. I was frightened that you wouldn't love me, that you'd leave me, whatever. But I stay in those 4 categories and see if I can make amends. And amends, as I understand it, is to correct and repair. If you make an amendment to the Constitution, or let's say you're going to buy a house and you say, well, if you put a new roof on it, new carpets or, tiled floors, pest control thing, inspection, you can amend the contract, and then the realtor would say, well, if we do all those 3 things, would you buy this house? Yes, correct and repair, or to make amends. I hear people talking about, and I hear it often, I went to go make amends for my part. Shame on you. Shame on you. Because that would be to indicate that you had something to do with it too. I mean, I use the example, like, I was just driving. You were the one going in into the stores with the gun, and I'm sorry about the fire engine siren. I thought it was the police. I shouldn't have left you there. I'm glad you did the full 7. You didn't flip on me. And I just wanted to apologize for leaving you there. That's not an amends. You may be sorry. They're sorry you even found it. So we don't go and make amends for our part, because that would indicate that they had something to do with it. I mean, in that case, it's like, I was just driving. So it was like 35, 65. I mean, you went in with a gun, I mean, So the only place where I stray from the book, and it's not AA approved. Let's see if I'm following my notes. My apologies, just a second. Root of my trouble. Oh yeah, well, I'll go back to that. Remind me to go back to page 21, the real alcoholic. What about that real alcoholic? Oh, and I want to thank Steve for inviting me. It is an honor and a pleasure to be invited anywhere. Trust me. I was the guy on page 21 where they would people were were like, little did I know, we're not going to invite Ross, right, to the party, because he won't leave. Page 21 actually is it talks about the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I don't know if you guys are aware of who wrote that story. It was written by Robert Louis Stevenson. He died of alcoholism, and possibly it was autobiographical. He would drink an elixir and become this terrible thing. But I'm almost done here. So what I do is I have my people do a prayer. It's out of Forgive Us Our Trespasses. Excuse me. It's a one prayer method. If you have like a resentment, you loose them and let them go. You get alone by yourself. It's out of Sermon on the Mount from Emmett Fox. But what you do is you do the prayer once. The book talks about praying for people for 2 weeks or whatever. I don't have the patience. I don't have the ability to pray for somebody for 2 weeks. I just, so this method, you pray for them once, you loose them, you let them go. And on no account do you ever do the prayer a second time, because you've done it once, and to do it a second time would be to tactfully repudiate your own work. So it's like a double negative. When you are done with that prayer, every time thoughts of the delinquent come back, you bless them. You bless them. You take them out of your mind. Instead of thinking like, oh, here's what I should have said. Here's what I'm going to say. Oh, this is what I should have done. You just bless them. And it'll say after a few days, sooner or longer, you will get to a place where you've completely forgiven them. Now you can make your amends. Now you can go to those people and say, hey, I was wrong. And they'll be able to, hopefully they can see that you're genuinely forgiven them. So that's not out of the big book, but it's similar to what the acceptance is the key. Pray for people for 2 weeks. Just a second. I did that. Contempt. Root of my troubles. So then the other, when doing 10, I have my guys, if they don't call me, I'm okay. If they have 10-step buddies, Bob Olson talks about having other guys besides his sponsor that he can call and do 10-step with. Say, hey, I had this problem. This is what happened. And I think it's important to do that to the extent that if you have people that you can call that will guide you back to God, because it's always God. It's always, sounds like you're off the beat. So for my 11-step stuff, I use something from a gentleman named Dave Fredrickson, straight out of the book. It's 12 prayers and 12 meditations. And it's straight out of the book. And my sponsor, when I first got sober, he wanted me reading pages 83 to 88. And this one gives you guided directions on, throughout the day. Again, it talks about asking. And as Dave says, 95% of us pray, maybe higher, 97. About maybe 5% meditate, 1% do visions. The book talks about them, doesn't really name them as visions, but you will meditate on what it would look like when I'm being selfish, or meditate on what it would look like, and that's a vision, to change your thoughts towards someone you can help. Make a vision of looking at maybe you have someone who's in trouble. You make a vision of what their life would look like if they weren't in trouble or they had patience. He also does a second step proposition. Very, very powerful. Comes with cards for your wallet. What does God want from me? What areas of my life have I not given to God? That would be second step proposition. So we've done 11, and then back to 12. It says on page 89, excuse me, nothing will so ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with others. It will, so it's always about reaching out and the reason I go to meetings generally is trolling. I'm looking for new guys. I'm looking for someone to help, because that's what I'm supposed to be doing, carrying this message. And then I would, I'm almost done. So it says on 89, nothing will so ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with others. It will so ensure immunity from drinking as intensive. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to alcoholics, and you can help when no one else can, and you can secure the conference when others fail. Remember, they're very ill. So life will take on a new meaning to watch people recover and to help others recover. Now, probably I got sober in late 89, probably somewhere around 2004. I was talking to a gentleman, Cliff Bishop, who developed Primary Purpose. He was sponsored by Joe McQuaney of Joe and Charlie. He asked me, I'm sitting in my drive at my house, and he says, Ross, what do you call your guys? I figure it's a trick question. I didn't know what to call them. And, some people call them pigeons or whatever. And I believe I said the word sponsee. And that's basically what I call them. And that's what everybody calls them. Some of my heroes that I listen to speak call them that. He says, why don't you look that up in the dictionary, Ross? I said, okay. And he says, don't bother. The word does not exist. There is no receiving end of a sponsor. If you sponsor a little league, they are not sponsees. They are a little league that's sponsored by. And I said, well, what do you call them? Well, the book has 4 references to people we sponsor. Candidate, protege, prospect, and I think the most important one, it says friend. Hopefully you make a friend. So it took me about 6 months, maybe a year, to eliminate that word from my vocabulary. I don't use it. It's not in the dictionary. It's probably in Wikipedia. I know everybody uses it. It's not a word. You might want to consider that. There are prospects, proteges, candidates, and most important, friends. I consider people I work with my friend. I want them to be able to trust me and to give me a fifth step and tell me everything they need to tell me. If they think I'm a parole agent, they're going to leave something out. Think I've pretty much covered it. I know I took more than an hour. 10-step promises is how I would close. And then there's people that go to leave AA, find religion. We are not opposed to what says be quick to see where religious people are right. I would suggest, as my friend Peter says, along with, not instead of. You want to go back to church? Whatever you want to do to enhance your spirituality, we're all for it. But don't leave. Don't leave, because if that was the case, then we wouldn't have priests in AA. If going back to church sufficient for to treat our alcoholism, and I believe that may be it. Thank you for letting me share. God bless.